Good morning, people. We're back again with some brain talk. All right, so here we have the brain. Real quick. Oops! And the brain is falling apart. Typical male brain. Completely scatterbrained. Yes. All right, and let's see if we can keep it together. All right, so we got eek. Kinda, sorta, togetherish. Okay, so we got the two hemispheres, the right and left cerebral hemispheres, and the right and left cerebellar hemispheres. The cerebellum is the smaller brain that lies below the cerebrum, the bigger brain. Now, on the surface of the cerebrum, you'll notice some speed bumps. Speed bumps are called gyri, or gyrus for singular, and in between the speed bumps you have these deep depressions, which are called sulcus, or sulci for plural. Now, neurologists have been able to map out some parts of the brain, and they say that there is a central sulcus, and then in front of the central sulcus there is a precentral gyrus and a postcentral gyrus. Now, they've been able to discover that these gyri have specific functions. The precentral gyrus, it is the primary motor cortex. In other words, all motor information before leaving the brain must terminate here. And the postcentral gyrus is the primary sensory cortex. In other words, all sensory information must terminate here before it is distributed to the sensory parts of the brain for further processing. In terms of neurology, its clinical relevance per se would be in situations where a person has a stroke affecting those regions. They can literally predict what to expect in terms of what aspect of the gyrus is injured. Now, we have this longitudinal fissure separating the right from the left cerebral hemisphere, and we have a, I think it's called temporal fissure here, but please cross-check that, separating the frontal lobe from the temporal lobe, and of course we have a transverse fissure here separating the cerebrum from the cerebellum. Now we're going to kind of separate the two to show the two separate halves. Let me see if it's better. We'll work with this one. Let's see, we'll work with this one, then we'll jump to the other one. That's what we'll do. So we'll kind of do this. Now, over here now we see half of the cerebrum and the cerebellum. If you notice, we're going to be talking about the Elvis chicken today. We'll try to use some comparisons to identify the parts of the brain. You see this thing here? It looks like an afro. So picture you have a cross between Elvis and a chicken. That's what the Elvis chicken is all about. Now you have the afro here. Elvis's afro is called the corpus callosum. We have this portion here, kind of like his forehead, is called the septum pellucidum. So Elvis's forehead, septum pellucidum. Then you have the hairline / eyebrow, which is the fornix. And then you have Elvis being a Hollywood star, likes eyeshadow. You know, they do a little bit of extra. Now he has both bluish and pinkish eyeshadow. The blue eyeshadow is part of the choroid plexus. This is part of what produces cerebrospinal fluid. The pink eyeshadow leads to a lump at the back, which is your pineal gland. And then you can see Elvis's big old eyeball here. His eyeball here is called the, what is it called? The thalamus. And then the pupil, the bulge of the eyeball here, is called your interthalamic adhesion. Now, below the thalamus is your thalamus. Below the thalamus is your hypothalamus, which is equivalent to the inside of Elvis's cheek. I know it's a little kind of weirdish to think that the eyeball is looking inwards into his mouth, but just work with it, okay? So the inside of his cheek is the hypothalamus, and you'd notice that there's a cavity here, a depression here. This depression is your third ventricle, which leads to Elvis's. So the depression is kind of like, imagine you blow your cheeks up. The space in your mouth is that depression I'm referring to, the third ventricle.
Okay.
And then that leads to Elvis's throat, which is the cerebral aqueduct. Now,